9, 12, 10, 28, 2, 23.
This is the DSR podcast.
Yeah, I'm kind of grungy. I apologize. I haven't shaven or washed myself.
Look. Okay. All right. We'll end right at 2:30. Riley. Did you count it? Okay. Hello and welcome to Deep State Radio. I am your host, David Rothkopf, and we are joined today by two friends. One, our stalwart regular, Rosa Brooks of Georgetown University Law Center. How are you doing today, Rosa?
Howdy, David. I'm great.
See, we've already started with a lie. I don't believe that for one.
No, I was so inspired by President Trump's speech last night. I feel like the nation is moving to greatness again.
Can we cut this off right now?
The golden age. She's bought it. Okay. Well, we'll get back to that in just a little bit. And we're joined by another of our friends, John Sipher, who has had a long and distinguished career in the intelligence community, and who is one of the real great commentators out there on those issues. How are you, John?
Oh, I'm good. Thanks. Good to see you guys.
So let me start with a bit of intel-related news that came out today, and then we'll take that into the direction of the speech that Rosa was referring to. But the White House announced today that we have stopped sharing intelligence with Ukraine. Which, I don't know, Rosa's probably very enthusiastic. She loved everything she heard last night. How do you feel about it, John? Is this part of the golden age being reborn here in America?
Well, as you might imagine, I'm very upset by it, and I think it's a terrible mistake. I mean, countries often speak to each other through intelligence channels, and those are long-built personal relationships of trust that are below the political level, below the domestic political and partisan level. We share information, we talk, we sort of help solve problems. It's a ways, even where senior leaders can sometimes get information that they don't want to become public back and forth to each other. And the fact that it's become public and they sent out a message that we're stopping intelligence collection, when in fact they could have, there's many other ways to put pressure on someone you want to put pressure on politically or diplomatically. To stop intelligence sharing is and publicly claim it is something I think quite dangerous. Who's going to want trust to work with us? I mean, even folks that we've had long relationships with and will continue to work with us because of those relationships, they've got a question now, will this administration throw us under the bus? Will they publicly, pull things away immediately that we've invested a lot of time and effort into? And so there's a number of areas where this is bad. It's bad, I think, in terms of the diplomacy between trying to create a peace agreement with Ukraine and Russia, but I think it's worse in a sense of undermining this important channel of communication between countries.
Well, let me ask you one additional question before I turn to Rosa. We did a podcast last week. Our mutual friend, Mark Polymeropoulos, was on it. And one of the things we talked about was that the shift of the United States towards Russia, towards supporting Russia in Ukraine, towards supporting Russia, frankly, everywhere, and the simultaneous standing down of a lot of our defenses against Russia, even some offenses on the cyber front, is disconcerting, but it's more than disconcerting. It has to be seen as a threat within the Five Eyes community with whom we share intel. And you talk about it as a form of communications, but the foundation of that is trust. And it seems difficult to me to imagine how they could trust the U.S. as they once did. You've been at the middle of this. What do you see? Yeah,
I mean, it's difficult. Those relationships exist. The Five Eyes relationship is largely a SIGINT, signals intelligence relationship between the NSA and GCSQ and Britain and Australia and others. And a lot of those things are really integrated. And it's going to be hard to pull them apart. But on things like human intelligence sharing, which is quite robust inside the Five Eyes, it's something that would be very easy for a country that trust to be lost and us never know what we won't be receiving, right? So the Brits we still may go with them and drink and befriend and smoke cigars and talk upstairs, downstairs and stuff, but they're going to have to make a calculus. Are we going to give these people our more sensitive information now than when we worry about that they might use it publicly or might use it in terms of some diplomacy with the Russians? And so, yeah, I think the damage is already done. And we will never know because they're certainly not going to tell us what they don't share with us. There will continue to be those relationships, but they are slowly being drained away. And the unexplainable relationship with Putin, that's the one thing. Trump changes his mind on everything. He's across the board. He has no sort of set vision or view or ethics on anything, except one thing is consistent, is this relationship with Vladimir Putin. And he's never explained it. There's never been a narrative of innocence. No one's ever said, here's why I think it's important to have a relationship with Vladimir Putin. It's always been, you can't prove I did anything illegal, then did collusion or whatever it is, but there's never been any explanation of why this happens. And I don't think anyone else, sensible person, thinks it's a good idea.
Do you have any ideas, Rosa, why that relationship exists like that? I mean, it's just anything come to your mind just off the top of your head?
You're trying to get me to say he's a Russian asset, aren't you? But I, as you know, I've always been a little skeptical of that. What do I know? I don't know. But I've always been skeptical about that because I don't know. Well, so why would somebody become a Russian asset, right? There are two possible reasons. One is they love Russia and they're really committed to it in some way. Trump is committed to nothing, so it can't be that, And two is they've got some dirt on you and you're ashamed lest it be released. Trump is unshameable, so it doesn't seem likely that it could be that. I mean, can you think of something that would make Donald Trump embarrassed? It's not clear that there exists anything. I take it back. I suppose there is a third, which would be that they are bribing you with billions and billions and billions. But I don't think the Russians think that Trump is even worth that much. And frankly, at this point in his life, he's got so many other ways of getting money. So I who knows, right? But and I'm not sure it matters. That the effect is the same. He doesn't have to be a Russian asset. He's helping Russia. It doesn't really matter why he's doing it. The fact is, it's what he's doing is extraordinarily helpful to Russia and extraordinarily unhelpful to all traditional U.S. allies. So I don't really care on some level anymore. Doesn't seem like a particularly interesting question. Why? I mean,
oh, well, shoot me. Forgive me for asking.
Try harder to ask me.
Yeah.
but
I thought it was a good question, David.
Thank you, John.
but in all seriousness, I think it seems like the wrong question in a sense. Who cares? We sort of judge it by the effects. And the effects are horrendous. I was thinking the other day. I mean, just what a seismic, shattering recalibration of global relations this is. That this is sort of, this, and I hope to God that we don't end up in some sort of horrific global conflict. But this is sort of the order of Hitler remaking Europe. In the 1930s, late 1930s, just the reorientation, just the sort of up is down, left is right, black is white sense of everything you thought you knew about the U.S.'s role in the world. Who are our friends? Who are our foes? Everything you thought you knew has now been turned upside down, and Trump is perfectly happy to admit that. He said it. He says, "I'm not aligned with anybody. I'm just doing what I feel like doing, and I'm making a break with the past." The thing that I do still find rather shocking, I don't know why I find it shocking. I should be over this. Is that the GOP seems perfectly okay with it, and I sort of understand younger millennial and Gen Z Americans being okay with it, right? That they kind of missed the whole Cold War thing, and Russia, what's Russia? It's some country far away. Why shouldn't we be their friend? That there's some sort of totally ahistorical piece of this for some people. But I am shocked that so many Republican members of Congress, people who a very short time ago were quite articulate on why Russia is not our friend, why Ukraine is our friend, et cetera, have just completely abandoned any pretense whatsoever of caring. one way or the other about all of this. And the only other thing I would say, going back to the comment you made, I know you were asking this rhetorically, David, when you said, should Ukraine maybe think that they shouldn't trust us anymore? I mean, good God, the only thing that's surprising is that they didn't know that already.
Yeah, I have to say, Trump last night said he'd received a letter from Zelensky. Of course, he didn't receive a letter from Zelensky. Zelensky tweeted something out on social media, but he said, essentially Zelensky's coming around and he's bending the knee. And if Zelensky were sitting here, I would say, don't do that, because I don't trust Trump. I don't trust Putin. I think Trump will try to advance Russian interests, and if he can get a win for himself along the way, that's fine. But I just want to go back to Rosa's comment about the seismic shift, because I'm particularly interested in how that shift feels on people like you, John, who spent 30 years of your career, 28 years of your career, in the middle of a world in which there was a principal adversary, Soviet Union, that then, the torch was carried by former KGB folks like Putin forward, and they remained an adversary. And all of a sudden, you wake up one morning, and it's not just like Trump 1.0, where we're kind of flattering Putin and doing stuff like that. Systematically, we have changed the U.S. policy. We are against NATO. We are undermining NATO. We are against Ukraine. We are undermining Ukraine. And in area after area after area, at the Department of Homeland Security, at the Department of Justice, at the Department of Defense, programs that targeted or defended us against Russia are being stood down, eliminated. Russia's being invited back into the tent on the G8, invited back into the country diplomatically, or that seems like it's in the cards. Marco Rubio is talking about deals we could do with Russia. Russia's our friend, NATO's our enemy, and you wasted 30 years of your life, John. How do you feel about that?
I don't feel like I did waste 30 years of our life, and I hope it comes around. But in one sense, it is personal. I did work in Russia. I did work on Russian issues. I was involved in trying to thwart Russian espionage and Russian malign influence and disinformation and subversion and sabotage and such. But frankly, it's more important. There's a clear history here, and I don't know why Donald Trump doesn't see that it also makes Democrats look bad too, which is something he does seem to enjoy, right? So there's a long history of Vladimir Putin taking advantage of us and taking advantage of Ukraine. There's been a number of ceasefires. He's broken all of them. He's lied about all of them. His actions around the world have been consistently anti-Western, but also anti-American. They've done assassinations. They've tried to influence elections. They've tried to put, people in the United States against each other. They've involved in, like I said, sabotage, subversion, espionage, all of these things, including, murder and assassination around the world. And then economically, it doesn't make any sense. They have an economy the size, maybe it's smaller than Italy's, right? And if there's, he thinks he's making some Kissinger move that he's going to build a relationship with Russia that's going to pull him away from China. That's completely silly.
By the way, I was at Harvard last week, and everybody was going around going, is this a reverse Nixon?
Oh, please.
And they were like, a reverse Nixon. It sounded like reverse cowgirl to me. And I was like, this is a sexual position that I don't even want to think about. But go. Sorry.
I'm impressed you know what it is, because I don't know what that is. But
yeah, no, I don't either. Go on. Sorry.
No, but that's right. I mean, I think people like Marco Rubio, who's obviously had to twist himself in so many, like a pretzel to do this, will try to say these kind of things. This is a clever way from us to pull the Russians away from China. Why? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, China's a big, huge power. They've made it clear that they're tied to Russia, and they're tied to Russia not because Russia's some wonderful thing, but because both of them hate us. That's why they're tied, because it's an anti-American, grouping. And so it doesn't make sense politically. It doesn't make sense economically. He's used his security services against us. He's an imperial power who attacks his neighbors. He wants everyone to be a vassal under his thumb. There's nothing in any sensible way that should think America in its Western sense should be supporting this. But that's why what you guys are saying, this is incredible. And it's a huge change, is we are undermining allies around the world, and we are supporting someone who, other than Donald Trump, I can't imagine, without people being afraid of Donald Trump, anyone would admit that this is a good idea.
Go on, Rosa.
No, I'm just, I mean, here's something I struggle with. I don't think, and this is true domestically as well as when it comes to foreign policy. I don't think that the collective we of people who care about democracy, care about something that we like to call the rules-based international order, blah, blah, blah. I don't think we do a very good job of articulating why these things are important. And I do worry that we, and I include myself in this, that we tend to get sloppy and fall back on a sort of, but you can't change this because what was better and what you're doing is horrible. And so we should go back to what we used to have. And that's not a good answer, right? And this is something I've sort of struggled with for years, since Trump first emerged on the national political scene. That he has a actually somewhat coherent approach to international relations, right? I think it's a terrifying one. It's just power. That's all it is. And as you've heard me say many times, even calling it transactional.
But excuse me, I just want to clarify. You mean it's only power?
It's
not
only
just. Well, just could mean two things, right? So you mean it's only power?
only power. The
Right.
strong take from the weak. And as I've said before, calling it transactional is too kind to it, because that implies that there is some sort of repeat interactions in which you can build up relationships. That's not what Donald Trump is about. Donald Trump is about, I will take what I can get when I can get it. And the fact that you are my friend and you just did 15 things for me yesterday, if I don't need anything from you right this second, I will squash you like a bug if I can, because I can, right? That's what Donald Trump's approach to the world is like, and that extends both to his views of domestic policy and his views of the international order. I think it's easier to articulate why that is terrifying and destabilizing and dangerous globally than it is to articulate what is the better order that we think there ought to be. And we shouldn't answer that question by retreating into like, well, back in the good old days when boys were boys and men were men, and the Cold War was the Cold War and Russia was the big baddie, and we love free trade, by the way. Like, that's not the answer, clearly. And I think that is going to be a real challenge for both the Democrats and the center as we go forward, to articulate a compelling affirmative vision of what we think the international order should look like, what our relationships should look like, who our friends should be, how we're going to handle our frenemies, et cetera. So I don't. That's not an answer. That's
but in an age where there's not three networks for people getting all their information,
right.
There's almost no real way to get that to people,
right.
Kind of message. But so do they have to feel it? Do they have to understand that by destroying this rules-based order, which doesn't sound good, I agree with you,
right.
but it's going to hurt us economically.
Yeah.
It's going to hurt us like all of across the board, those things that we understand that we need to articulate better. People are going to feel it eventually. And maybe not Donald Trump. He'll probably die before he realizes the true damage, what he's done. But it's going to cause, there's so many things across the world. We talk about intelligence. There's so many things where it's a trust-based business. And when you start to take away that trust, there's going to be stuff that we lose. We're not even going to realize what we've lost.
It reminds me, by the way, I saw on the internet the other day an old Russian joke of a guy walking by a newsstand every day. And the newsstand guy finally says, "What are you looking for?" And he says, "Well, I'm looking for the obituaries." And the guy says, "Well, the obituaries are in the back of the paper, not on the front page like this." And he says, "Yeah, that's not the obituary I'm looking for." But let me ask you a question that I haven't heard on any of the networks, the good ones and the bad ones. And, I haven't heard in any of the Twitter sphere or any place else. But you can answer this question, John.
Uh-oh.
No, it seems like a relevant question. Has Vladimir Putin stopped spying on the U.S.? Has he stopped his operations against the U.S.? Has Vladimir Putin said, "Stand down, Russia. We're not going to do what we did in the past because Trump's doing all this, and so we're friends now"?
Well, there's a long pattern of him looking for nice ways to engage with us. So that I think now that Pete Hegseth has said that they're not going to do cyber attacks, I would suspect that the Russians are not involved in that anymore. But it's your point's a great one. It's absolutely not. Putin is like what Rosa says Trump is like. He's about power. And if they sniff weakness, they take advantage of it. So if we say that we're not going to continue, cyber collection or cyber attacks, you can bet that Vladimir Putin is going to do more of it. And so absolutely not. We've never seen any effort. I mean, and again, they should go back if they want to attack Democrats, go back and look at the Hillary Clinton reset and all these other types of things that we did with the Russians. Every effort that we've tried to be nice and good with the Russians has been blown up in our face. In fact, your friend Mark Polymeropoulos, I wrote an article with Doug Wise, Mark Polymeropoulos, and Steve Hall a while back about CIA's engagement with Russian intelligence in terms of working with them on counterterrorism and things. And every sort of new president would come in and would say, "Hey, we should cooperate with the Russians on terrorism or anti-Islamic this or whatever it is." And the people who work with Russia would say, "No, they're going to screw us. They never work with us." And they'd say, "No, we need to try." And every time we try, it becomes a brutal, awful failure. They screw us in the process. And then a new Secretary of State or president comes in and like, "Oh, we need to work with it." And it's happened over and over again. And my friend Doug Wise, gave this, which I wrote in the Washington Post piece, said, it's like those people who buy baboons as pets. They buy a baboon and it rips your face off. And he goes, would you then go back and buy another baboon next time? Like, how many baboons do you got to buy before you realize you're going to get your face ripped off every time?
Well, it helps if you're a narcissist and you think everything's about you and you think the relationship is between Putin and Trump, when in fact Putin doesn't give a damn about Trump.
Oh my God, no.
And all he's trying to do is to destroy the United States, and he will support anything that does that and anything that supports and grows Russia. We've only got a few minutes left here, and so Rosa, I do want to turn to the event you made reference to last night. The President of the United States stood up, said at the beginning and 2 hours later at the end of a speech that we were entering a golden age, and in between, he created what I called in a probably overwrought phrase in the column I wrote about it in the Daily Beast, a kind of Bayeux tapestry of lies. I mean, it was the biggest, most elaborate set of lies that I've ever heard.
Whole tapestry of lies.
Yeah.
Really?
So, a big
marbles of lies. Or maybe
but that's not a tapestry. Obviously, I was going. So
that's why you're pro, David.
Come on. You've got your own entertainment empire. But Rosa, you watched it. What did you take away from it?
I didn't watch it. I couldn't bring myself to watch it. It was too painful. I was happy to get the regurgitated little snippets that the fake New York Times and others saw fit to share with me. Not to mention all my many friends who were pinging away like crazy on Signal and various forms of social media. And that was really, really more than I needed as it was. And frankly, I don't think the Democrats should even have been there. I mean, they've been being made fun of for their silly.
But they held up signs, Rosa.
They held up silly little signs that made them as a mean-spirited one. I think it was Laura Ingraham said they made them look like they were bidding at an auction. And indeed, that is exactly what those little signs looked like. They looked dumb. Trump is very good at getting people to look dumb.
How did Alyssa Slotkin do for the after? She's a former CIA officer.
Yeah, I thought she did an excellent job. And she did an excellent job by, Trump, who blathered on for an hour and a half. She gave a short speech, and she emphasized that what I think is the fundamental point that is, and the one and only point that is likely to win over the people who voted for Trump, but a little queasily. When she said, he's going to make you pay for all this. He's promising you all these things. It ain't going to work. That essentially you're being played for suckers. And I think we know that to be the truth. Trump is playing people for suckers, and I think some of them are beginning to catch on.
And Putin's playing Trump for a sucker.
So I thought she did a good job. But I don't think the Democrats should even have shown up, because once you show up, you've got two choices. Either you sit there looking pained and polite while he lies through his teeth for 90 minutes, or you do goofy looking things like hold up your little signs, and then you just look like a bunch of, lame, pathetic idiots. So I wish they just hadn't shown up, because none of us should be acting like this is something worth sitting through, frankly. It's a tissue of lies, as you said, David. It's big, beautiful tapestry of big, ugly lies.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, John, one thing that struck me was that he delivered a speech where, if you sort of got through the lies to the substance, was horrifying and represented as sort of renunciation of everything that was important about America. And yet, at the same time, he made all that boring. And that's, how do you do that? That's a kind of a rhetorical accomplishment. But what was your takeaway?
Well, on one hand, I was worried that he was going to pull us out of NATO. Now, of course, in a sense, NATO, despite all of its formalities, is really just, again, built on trust. The fact, the notion that you will come to the defense of an ally in case of war. And I think Trump has already cut out that trust. So in a certain sense, NATO has already been weakened pretty much by this president. I thought he was going to pull out formally, or try to pull out formally. And that's when we go back to the intelligence, pulling out intelligence from Ukraine and then saying so publicly is again, it's tearing away at that trust that is really hard to rebuild when that's done publicly. So I didn't watch it either. My wife would have shot me if I even tried to turn it on, just hearing the voice. And so again, I read the papers and things afterwards, and
made you feel just like Cold War Russia.
Exactly. Well, it is in many ways. There's so many things. I wrote an article for the Atlantic a long time ago about it's about is which is worse, collusion or convergence. And in some ways, Trump is converging to be very Putin-like in what he does in terms of attacking the media and making people around him rich, and using lies and all these other kind of things that are very Russian, of people who've lived through that. And I hope our system is can protect itself better than the Russian one has. But yeah, so again, same thing. I knew he was just going to lie, and it was going to drive me crazy, so I didn't listen to it.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like good advice, folks, as we go forward in all of this. Here you have two seasoned observers of Washington who have concluded the best way to observe Washington is not to observe it. I did write a column for the Daily Beast.
Oh, see, we read that. That's
yeah, you can read that. It's called Trump's Speech Reduced American Democracy to a MAGA Game Show. Because I sort of took a little exception to, presidents always sort of point to people up in the bleachers and say they're my friend and whatever. But Trump turned it into Oprah, and it's like, oh, here's a little kid and he wants to be a police officer. So here's the head of the Secret Service and you're now a Secret Service member, kid. And then it's some other guy. Oh, here's a guy who's gone through some trauma and he wants to get into West Point. Well, I've got some news for you, buddy. You're into West Point, and I'm going to... And it was a game show, and it was kind of people, we're just.
And this, of course, is how Trump has staffed his administration, with the equivalent of 13-year-olds and sort of random people he runs into on the street he happens to like. I'm sure, frankly, that 13-year-old boy would probably do a better job than some of the 20-year-olds that Elon Musk has brought in. At least he seems to have a greater sense of civic duty than they do.
Yeah, well, but also, there was a dark irony lying beneath each one of these things, and to pick just two, that 13-year-old boy was cancer diagnosis, and Trump cut all funding for cancer research. But we didn't talk about that. There was a cop he held up and said, I want to have the death penalty against cop killers. And it was like, but you're standing in the Capitol where you led an insurrection that led to the death of cops. So does that mean you too, buddy? And so there are these kind of subtexts that were extremely dark. Anyway,
just one quick thing. I think if Trump has a gift, it is that ability to avoid any accountability for anything or decisions he makes and turn everything away from him. And frankly, this gift to be able to pretend like he's not part of the government so he can blame others in the government. So, I mean, this notion is we don't even know what's in Fort Knox. Like, you're the head of the goddamn government. What do you mean you don't know what's in? If you want to know what's in Fort Knox, you could have easily asked someone or had to take him there or bring him there. Like, you don't. But he does that stuff publicly so everything is domestic politics. It's all to his base. And so they're like, oh my goodness, thank God Trump's there, because who knows what's in Fort Knox? Well, he does.
Yeah, well, back in the olden days when all our forebears lived in the woods and were afraid of being eaten by a bear, being alert was a big plus because you survive. Nowadays, given everything that we see and all the people around us, obliviousness is a fantastic talent. And the ability to just tune it out and go about your life can be a real way of avoiding stress and actually surviving. Periodically, it's got to be discussed what we're seeing. And to do that, it's really best when you have really smart people with a lot of experience who haven't lost their sense of humor yet. And I am so glad we had both of you today. Thank you, John. Hope you'll join us again sometime soon. Rosa, it'll be good to see you again each and every week, because I depend upon it for my mental health, and so do all of the listeners. And all of you listeners out there, thanks for joining us, and we'll have more just like this several times a day, as we do every day here at the DSR Network. Join us for that. Until then, bye-bye.